Hello and welcome to another vintage video on StarCityGames.com. I'm Drew Levin, and this time I am playing a bit of a different Oath deck. Earlier this week you saw that I played a Burning Oath combo deck. It was incredibly challenging, and this recording we're dialing it back a little, picking our colors a little more conservatively, and only playing 3 of them. We're playing a BUGOath deck. It still has 2 Gristlebrands. It still has all of the broken blue spells that you would expect from a vintage blue deck, but it has a few more tricks, a few less knockout punches. And so, as you can see, it's got some control elements. It's got Jaces as a backup win condition if Gristlebrand doesn't quite get there. And so we are on the play. With a single blue source, a Mental Misstep, a Force of Will, a Time Walk, and an Oath of Druids, which I think is a hand worthy of keeping. Even if we miss on a land drop for a turn or 2, we still have plenty of ways to interact. And if we hit our land drop, it's good. If we hit a Forbidden Orchard, it's even better. And so we can lead off with our island. The only way that we are really in trouble this game is if we face a wasteland into a sphere on the draw. Absent that start, I think that we're set up against nearly anything. So while we do that, let's take you over and show you the deck in question. It is a BUGOath deck. It is enough of a control deck to play Library of Alexandria. Since it plays black in Vintage, has Yawgmoth's Will, Vampiric Tutor, Demonic Tutor, that sort of thing. One thing that I truly love about bug decks in Vintage is that when they have the occasion to, they play Abrupt Decay. Abrupt Decay, an excellent card against everything from Grafdigger's Cage to Aegis of Honor, the 2/1 enchantment, gives you hexproof white creature, and a catch-all, and some mana drains to sort of round out a counter magic suite. When I found this list, it had a rebuild and a show and tell instead of the last 2 missteps. I actually really like Mental Misstep in this deck, given that the best card against you is Grafdigger's Cage by some margin, and Mental Misstep gives you the ability to fight over all of the normal Vintage stuff. So we are in fact facing down a wasteland on turn 1, which is our worst case scenario. Let's see what their follow-up is. So we don't draw a land. And let's see what our opponent is packing. I don't think that there are too many hands that one could mulligan that have Force of Will and Mental Misstep on the play. I think that I might also be a little too liberal in how I keep hands given how powerful the format is. Opponent has another wasteland and a sphere. Okay, so our worst case scenario has indeed come to pass. We'll be pitching Mental Misstep to this Force of Will, since our path to victory involves casting our spells, and one of the upsides of playing a workshop deck is that it doesn't exactly ask you for a lot of 1-drops. It in fact asks you for none of them, allowing you to play a very effective Chalice of the Void on 1. So our opponent plays a Revoker and a Sphere. we're going to hold up our Scalding Tarn so that we can't get wastelanded off of green. What we'd like to do is draw another mana source, of course, and ideally a land, and be able to cast our Oath of Druids. I'm actually quite happy playing against a Phyrexian Revoker here, given how bad Revoker is in this position relative to the contents of our deck. Naming Voltaic Key is fine, naming Jace the Mind Sculptor or Gristlebrand is less so. Although, in fairness, I don't know of many answers that a Workshop deck has to Gristlebrand outside of Tanglewire. With Workshop, the main strategy is to get permanents in play as quickly and as often as possible, since availability of casting your spells is really what tends to be at a premium. So, we kept a hand that is soft to a Workshop deck, and we still aren't being really punished for it. You'll note that we're on a very small clock. And I would certainly like not to show that we are playing an Oath of Druids deck if I can help it. Right now, all signs point to us playing a Tezzeret Time Vault Voltaic Key deck. And while we do have a Tezzeret the Seeker in our sideboard, we are an Oath of Druids deck first and foremost. And I can't imagine bringing in a Grafdigger's Cage against a traditional blue strategy without seeing something like Oath of Druids first. So, Smokestack, okay. Smokestack is certainly a problem for us. We're going to need to draw running lands or end up losing our mana base. So here we have a tough decision. Actually, no. We're already dead, sorry. They have Wasteland for one of our lands and can then lock us out with Smokestack after that. So we'll pass back, and we've already lost this game. We just have to play this out and then concede next turn. Hopefully see a little bit more information. Seeing Smokestack as opposed to something like Cold Oath the Forge Master is certainly worthy information. Being able to see what we're going to die to is also useful. So it looks like a fairly land-locking type strategy. Okay, we are done with this game. So, the missteps are easy cuts against a Workshop deck. After that, Mana Drain is pretty poor. Show and Tell is good against Grafdigger's Cage and other hate cards, and on the off chance that they have one of those, I think we'll keep it in so that we can Mystical or Vampiric or Demonic for it. Swan Song counters basically everything that they don't play. Meanwhile, Basic Forest is quite good. Nature's Claims are there for the Basic Forest. If you remember the Night's Whisper Control Slaver videos, I talked about how valuable having a basic land of the color that your sideboard artifact removal is of. That is what I meant. And so we'll board in Another Abrupt Decay and a Rebuild, and I think we'll cut a Jace for a Tezzeret, since Time Vault Voltaic Key is one of our best ways of winning, and at the point where we're able to cast a Planeswalker, I would prefer it be a Tezzeret. And I understand that every mana counts. I just think that if we are able to clear their spheres out, that we'll be able to have 5 as often as we're able to have 4. I hope that I am not wrong to a significant degree, but that's my logic. This is our deck. For those of you who are uninitiated, Gaia's Blessing is both a way to not overmill yourself with Oath of Druids, but also to, if you have both of your Gristlebrand's out of play, you can mill yourself for your deck, reveal it, and then shuffle it back in with Gaia's Blessing, allowing you to play an inevitability-focused game. Imagine an Elixir of Immortality deck in Standard, and extrapolate, except you don't gain the life, but you also don't pay the mana or have to use the card. So, this hand is quite good. We have the ability to cast a Time Vault and activate it on turn 2, so we're going to keep play Key off of Mana Crypt on turn 1 and hold up Misty Rainforest. Actually, we can untap it. That seems strictly superior. So, if need be, we can cast Rebuild or just pay for Mystical through Disruption. Okay, so Sphere is fine. I think we just Underground Sea and Vampiric Tutor for Time Vault. We are putting our opponent on an incredibly short clock, and should they fail to play Phyrexian Revoker or have a removal spell for one of our artifacts, they'll lose this turn. They can still play it out, of course. We are due to die to our own Mana Crypt at some point in the future, but our opponent chose not to take that chance, gave us credit for being able to kill them before our Mana Crypt killed us, and so that's, I suppose, how you win the game on turn 2 in Vintage. So for the final game, being on the draw, of course, is a much more disadvantaged position. None of the cards that we could sideboard in, I think, are any better than what we have going for us. I think that Mana Drain and Thoughtseize are similarly low utility. Mana Drain is better by virtue of being blue, and if we ever get out from early spheres, it can counter a major threat, whereas Thoughtseize is unlikely to be able to do so. Certainly not on a time frame that we're interested in. We're much more interested in making them use their mana and answering them there, rather than trying to deprive them. This is an unfortunate hand. I don't know that we could keep regardless, but Artillerian Academy isn't going to make any mana. So we have to send back this beautiful, beautiful hand. We will mulligan this one. We're actually going to keep a hand that has quite a few mana sources and endeavor to play out our mana and play for a longer game where we can top deck spells and cast them. Our opponent has come out of the gates quite hard with a Trinisphere. Fortunately, we have 3 mana sources, actual lands, mind you, in our hand. And he's racing his own Mana Crypt as a clock. Doesn't look like he has a more potent threat than a Mishra's Factory, given how much mana he currently has access to. So this will be our clock of 1.5 against his clock of 2. Possibly exacerbated by Ancient Tomb. His last card doesn't seem to be anything of particular value, and so the way that Trinisphere and Sphere of Resistance work in concert may be confusing to you. Trinisphere says each spell that would cost less than 3 mana costs 3 instead. Sol Ring initially costs 1, it costs 2 with Sphere, and then it costs 3 because of Trinisphere. It doesn't cost 3, and then 1 is 4. Lodestone Golem is going to be a bigger nuisance than Mishra's Factory for sure. But if we can draw a card that answers that, we'll be just fine. This, for instance. What can we find with Tezzeret? What indeed? A Time Vault, a Voltaic Key, a Sensei's Divining Top. Tezzeret's going to die this turn, no matter what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we can't even cast it. A pity. That costs 3. They all cost 3. How do we get out of this? I think we just cast both of our artifacts and try and cast Tezzeret and Time Vault or Voltaic Key next turn. We're on a probabilistic 2-turn clock. Wasteland is correct to target Underground Sea, but we aren't really short on colored mana at all, given our Black Lotus. And playing Mana Crypt is certainly risky, given that we're now facing lethal, but I still think it's our best option. So we have XB1. We get top, and we activate it. Unfortunately, that is the end of us. We can certainly play to our opponent hoping, well, fearing that we have a removal spell on top of our deck and attacking Tezzeret instead of us. And then winning the Mana Crypt flip, but we'll have to put them to that test themselves. I mean, this is certainly a more interesting mind game than one would initially think. Well, at this point it makes sense for them to just name Tezzeret and attack us. Or name Black Lotus, yes, and then we die. A well-played match by them. We'll be right back.